It started like any other Wednesday night on the late shift. I'd been a bus driver for almost 6 years. The 6 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. run on the number 52, from the wealthy high-rises near Lincoln Park, all the way down to the industrial wasteland of Cicero. I'm 34. I took this job because it was stable. I preferred working alone in the dark. No daytime traffic. No tourists asking questions. Just quiet. Janitors. Overnight stock boys. The occasional drifter looking for a warm place to sit. That night, October 17th, was unseasonably cold. A damp wind was blowing off the lake. By 1 a.m., the streets were slick with mist. I remember checking my mirror at the final stop on Western Avenue, just before I turned the bus around for the last trip back to the depot. The bus was empty, except for one person, a woman. She was sitting in the very last row, passenger side, pressed against the window. I hadn't noticed her get on. I always keep a mental tally of my passengers, especially late at night, but she was just there. I shrugged it off. Easy to miss someone when you're focused on traffic. The lighting in the back is always dim. She wore a long, dark coat with the collar turned up. Her face was hidden by a knit cap pulled low. Just another night owl heading home. Last stop, Cicero and Ogden. I called out over the intercom. This bus is out of service after this. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all, just stared out the window at the chain link fences and darkened warehouses. I pulled into the depot lot, parked in my bay. I stood up and turned on the interior lights, the bright fluorescent ones that make everyone look like ghosts. I walked toward the back. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice polite. "We're at the depot. You have to get off here." She still didn't move. For a second, my heart skipped. I thought maybe she was sick, or worse, dead. I took a step closer, reached out to tap her shoulder. My hand was about an inch from her coat. When she turned her head, her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked at me, then through me, and stood up without a word. She walked past me, down the aisle, stepped off the bus into the cold depot yard. I watched her walk toward the chain link fence, but by the time I grabbed my lunch bag and locked up, she was gone, vanished into the industrial wasteland. I thought it was weird, filed it under strange things that happen on the night shift, drove home. The next night, it happened again. Thursday, same route, same freezing weather. I picked up my bus at 5:45 p.m. The night was uneventful until the last run. As I pulled away from the final stop, I glanced in the mirror. There she was. Same dark coat, same knit cap, same seat in the back row. A jolt of unease shot through me. I actually swerved. I kept checking the mirror, trying to see her face, but the shadows made it impossible. I pulled over at the next intersection, opened my door, let the cold air in. I stood up and looked back. "Miss," I said, "you were on this bus last night, at the same time." She looked at me, that same vacant, exhausted stare. She said nothing. "I'm going to have to ask where you're going," I said, my voice firmer now. "This is the last stop. I can't take you back uptown." She just shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and turned back to the window. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly on the wheel, and drove the last 10 minutes to the depot. This time, I didn't try to touch her. I just opened the doors and waited. She sat there for a full 5 minutes, staring at the empty lot. Finally, she stood and left. Once again, she disappeared into the darkness between the parked buses before I could even get out of my seat. I rationalized it, told myself she was homeless, maybe riding the loop, getting off at the depot just to wait for the first morning bus. Drivers call them loopers. I decided, if I saw her again, I'd just ignore her, let her get her warmth. It wasn't hurting anyone. Friday night was the same, and Saturday, and Sunday. By Monday, a pattern had emerged that stopped being a curiosity and started being a dread. Every night, on the last run, she would be there. She never got on at any of the stops. I started watching religiously, scanning the sidewalks, the bus shelters, the dark corners. Nothing. I checked my mirror at the start of the last run. The back seat empty. But halfway through, on some dark stretch of road between stops, I'd look again, and she'd be sitting there. It was like she materialized out of the darkness itself. My rational mind fought it. Maybe she was getting on when I was focused on a tricky turn. Maybe she was hiding in the shadows where the camera couldn't see. But the unease was a physical weight in my gut. I started leaving the interior lights on for the whole last run. It didn't help. She just sat there, illuminated now. A silent, pale statue in a sea of empty orange plastic seats. On Tuesday, October 22nd, I tried something different. Instead of pulling into the depot, I stopped the bus a block before the entrance, on a deserted side street next to an abandoned factory. I turned off the engine, the lights. The silence was deafening. I stood up and walked to the back. She was there, as always. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "Enough. Who are you? What do you want? You've been on my bus every night for a week. You never get on at a stop. I need you to tell me what's going on, or I'm calling the police." For a long moment, she just looked at me. Then, slowly, she raised a hand and pointed out the window. I followed her finger. She was pointing at the factory. A massive, crumbling brick building with smashed windows and a faded sign. Sterling Processing Company. I passed it 1,000 times. Abandoned for years. "I need to go home," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't used it in a very long time. "Home? That building?" I laughed in disbelief. "Nobody lives there. It's condemned." She looked at me, and for the first time, there was an expression on her face. Fear. Raw, primal fear. "Please," she said, "just let me off here." Against every instinct, I opened the door. The hydraulic hiss was deafening in the silence. She stood up, walked past me, stepped off the bus. She walked toward the factory, her dark figure swallowed by the deeper darkness of the building's shadow. I watched until I couldn't see her anymore. Then I slammed the door shut and sped to the depot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I logged off, went home, but I didn't sleep. The next night, I had to go back. I was off shift, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. The fear in her eyes, the factory. I drove my personal car to the depot lot, parked, walked along the fence to the side street. The factory loomed ahead, black against the slightly lighter sky. I had a flashlight from my car, and, stupidly, a tire iron from my trunk. Getting in was easy. A plywood board over a loading bay door had been pried back, a gap just big enough to squeeze through. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of rust, chemical rot, and something else, something sickly sweet, like decay, mixed with heavy perfume. My flashlight danced over broken machinery, overturned barrels, drifts of old paperwork. I called out, a stupid, shaky hello? That echoed back at me. Nothing. I moved deeper, following a path through the debris that looked almost worn, like something had been using it regularly. I came to a set of metal stairs leading down. A basement. The smell was stronger here. I descended slowly, the metal groaning under my weight. At the bottom, a long corridor with doors on either side. Old storage rooms. The first few were empty, just dirt and rust. But the fourth door was different. It was metal, closed with a heavy-duty padlock that looked new. It gleamed in my flashlight, completely out of place in the decay. My blood ran cold. I heard something, a murmur, voices, low and indistinct. They were coming from behind the door. I pressed my ear to the cold metal. It wasn't just one voice. It was several, a hum of conversation, and underneath it, a rhythmic scraping sound, like metal on concrete. I should have run, should have called the police right then, but I was frozen, terror and morbid curiosity rooting me to the spot. Then I heard a sound that shattered the spell. A woman's scream, muffled, cut off short, came from behind that door. I stumbled back, dropped my flashlight. It clattered on the concrete, the beam spinning wildly, illuminating strange graffiti on the walls. Symbols I didn't recognize, dates scratched into the brick. I scrambled to pick it up and I ran. I burst out of the factory, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until I was back in my car, locking the doors, fumbling for my phone. I called 911, told them everything. The woman on the bus, the factory, the locked door, the scream. They sent a car. I waited down the street, watching as 2 officers approached the building. They were inside for a long time, 20 minutes, 30. Finally, they came out. One of them walked over to my car, a large man with a tired face. He shined his flashlight directly into my eyes. "Sir," he said, his voice flat, "there's nothing in there. Place is empty. Has been for a decade." "That's impossible," I said, my voice cracking. "There's a basement, corridor, a metal door with a new lock." He looked at me for a long time. "We went down to the basement, sir. It's just a dirt floor and some old support beams. No doors, no corridor. You sure you were in the right building?" I argued with him, told him exactly where I'd gone. He just shook his head, told me to go home, get some sleep, stop trespassing. Said if they got another call, I'd be cited. I drove home in a daze. I started doubting my own memory. Had I imagined the corridor? The door? The next day, I drove past the factory in broad daylight. Saw the loading bay I'd crawled through. The windows. It looked normal, abandoned, harmless, but I knew what I'd seen. I went back to work that night. Wednesday, October 30th. I almost called in sick, but I needed the money, and I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. The first runs were normal, but as the night wore on, the dread grew. 1 a.m. came, the last run. I drove, my eyes darting to the mirror constantly. The back seat was empty. I passed the factory, my skin crawling. I kept driving, made the final turn toward the depot. The bus was empty. I pulled into my bay, let out a huge sigh of relief. stood up to do my final walkthrough. I walked to the back, checking under seats for trash or lost items. I got to the very last row, the seat by the window, the one she always sat in. It was wet. I touched it. It wasn't water. It was thick and cold. I lifted my fingers to the dim light. They were smeared with a dark, reddish-brown fluid, blood, and there, on the floor beneath the seat, was a small, crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a receipt from a diner, a greasy spoon on the south side. The date was from 3 weeks ago, and scrawled on the back, in faint, frantic pencil, was a message. He knows. He's watching. Don't get off at the depot. Stay on. Tell someone. Tell the driver. My name is Anna. October 16th. October 16th. The day before I first saw her. I didn't go to the police this time. I went home and scrubbed my hands until they were raw. I quit my job the next day. Told them it was personal. I've spent the last 3 months trying to find information about a missing woman named Anna. There are dozens, hundreds, but one stuck out. A woman in her late 20s. Last seen getting off a bus near Cicero on the night of October 16th. Her name was Anna Reeves. The police report said she was a troubled individual with a history of mental illness, likely a voluntary missing person. The case was closed within a week. I still have that receipt. I keep it in a box under my bed. I don't know why. There are things I will never understand. How she appeared on my bus night after night if she was already dead, or trapped, or whatever she was. What was behind that metal door in the factory basement that the police couldn't see? Who was the he in her message? And was he watching me that night I stood in the corridor? And the question that wakes me up at 3 a.m. every single morning, my heart pounding, my sheets soaked with sweat, if she was trying to get help, if she was trying to warn me not to let her off at the depot that first night, then why, on my very last night as a driver, did she leave a fresh pool of blood on the seat where she always sat?